and then we would move on to the next moment of our event. So we are very honored that we have a roundtable with very distinguished professionals and speakers, and now they might think that I'm leveling a lot the expectations for the audience, but indeed you'll be very engaged with their presentations. So the roundtable is called "Moving Forward in Intersecting Fields for a World of All Ages." This is the motto for the discussion, so I will kindly ask each speaker to have a moment. They will have some presentations. I would say if we could keep for 10 minutes presentations, it would be perfect for timing of the event. After all the presenters have their moment, we'll have a round discussion with some comments and some questions more in terms of the way forward, as Sabine Springer made it. So not so much in terms of what we have done so far, but also how we can keep on the future. Just to let you also know and to inform all of you that we are not sure if one of the speakers will join us, because she had a personal situation during the morning, which is Mrs. Marta Lourenço from the National Museum of Science from Lisbon. But we hope that she may join us during that time. So for now, I will make all our participants and all our speakers on the big screen, and I will pass just directly to Dr. Vania de la Fuente Núñez, which is my very pleasure to be live with her once again. So Dr. Vania de la Fuente Núñez is an international expert on healthy aging and ageism. She's a doctor and anthropologist, and she currently works as an independent senior consultant, offering technical and strategic advice to governments and public and private entities in different countries to help improve the lives of older people and address ageism. Vania is the author of the book on ageism titled La Trampa de la Edad, I'm calling it in Spanish, which is the original title, and is a regular contributor to media outlets such as El País, CNBC, La Vanguardia, and RTV. Previously, Dr. Vania de la Fuente Núñez worked as an international civil servant in WHO for almost a decade, being responsible for the WHO global campaign to combat ageism, so very perfectly matched here, of course. And she has authored the landmark, the United Nations Global Report on Ageism. She also led the area of capacity building on the development of healthy aging policies and programs in countries and regions around the world. So a very global overview on this. Before working at WHO, Dr. Vania worked with different NGOs and research institutes and high and low income countries. So for me, it's very good to have Dr. Vania again. We have met, I don't know, 2 years ago. So Dr. Vania, the floor is yours.
Thank you so much, John. It's lovely to see you again, even if only virtually this time around. And it's great to also be here and have the opportunity to share a little bit about some progress that has been made in the area of ageism in different parts of the world. And then obviously what I will find the most interesting part is to answer any questions that come up through this roundtable. So if it's okay with everyone, I'm going to share a very brief presentation. Just give me 1 second. And hopefully, let me know, Joanna, if you're all able to see it.
Yes, it's fine.
Yeah. All right. So what I wanted to do in this presentation, and Maria already mentioned this, the 3 strategies that we identified based on the best available evidence that work to address ageism. But I wanted to provide details about each of those strategies and then very briefly outline some of the progress that has been made in advancing each of them. Of course, I only have 10 minutes. I'm not going to go into a whole lot of detail, but obviously if there are specific questions that you want to ask, I will be happy to address those after all of the presentations of the roundtable. So as Maria advanced, there are 3 key strategies that we know work and will help us create that better future and that world for all ages that we're all striving for. These are policy and law, educational activities, and intergenerational interventions. I'm going to briefly explain what each of those are, and then I will touch on some progress that has been made in each of them. and add also some caveats about some of that progress. Yeah. If we're looking at policies and laws, I mean, I guess this is the most logical one that anyone would think of, right? If we have the right policies and laws, we will be able to address discrimination and inequality on the basis of age and protect human rights. The good thing about this strategy is that it can be used to reduce or eliminate ageism against any group. But again, one important thing with policies and laws is that it's very important to have not only a very beautiful policy and law, but also to have the right implementing and monitoring mechanisms to ensure that that law or that policy is effectively implemented. We don't stop having very nice laws just sitting in a drawer and not necessarily being implemented as they should. The good thing is that we have made progress in the past few years. As you see on this slide, we've gone from 87 countries that had national legislation and enforcement mechanisms against age-based discrimination in 2018 up to 105 in the year 2023. This means that we are making progress. This also means that the Global Report on Ageism that I had the pleasure to co-author has raised this issue and has put it on the table. This is on the agenda right now, and I think countries are listening and they're starting to respond to the ageism that is present in every society. Because one of the things that we have not mentioned or has not been mentioned yet, I believe, is that ageism is very, very prevalent. Global data that we have shows that 1 in 2 people are ageist against older people. And if we reverse that coin and look at how many people report ageism, at least in Europe, that is 1 in 3, including younger and older people. So again, it's very prevalent and it is affecting a large number of people. So we need to start doing something to address it. If we then move to educational activities, sorry, this was not moving. These are very helpful for several reasons. Educational activities can help us first dispel misconceptions, all of those stereotypes that we have about different age groups, that we have about older people themselves. These activities can help us dispel those misconceptions. Also misconceptions that we may have about the actual process of aging, right? And the other important aspect that these types of activities can help us address is empathy. Depending on the design of the educational activity, they can really help us foster empathy or enhance the empathy that we have towards other people. Educational activities are quite varied. So they include kind of, I guess, sessions like this, right? Or even the program that you guys were sharing that you did. So where we try to transmit information through a course or integrate content on ageism, for example, in an established curriculum, or they can include very interesting types of initiatives that try to put us in the shoes of another person. So what I'm talking about here is role-playing exercises that recreate a situation where ageism happens, and then different people have to play the roles. You may also have an audience, and then that entire situation that they recreate is then discussed. So the people playing the roles will also go through that reflection process and explain why they behave in certain ways, but the audience will also be able to feed in. And by doing that, it creates a discussion that otherwise would never happen, because we are all on a daily basis, I would even say, exposed to ageism in our day-to-day, but we don't necessarily pause, reflect, and then react to those situations of ageism. And the role-playing exercise helps us do that. There are other types of activities that are a bit more techy and I guess more costly, but we don't need to go to that end to have successful educational activities. And here what I'm talking about are those that employ, for example, virtual reality. Sorry for the typo there. It should say virtual reality, not virtual reality. These types of activities are effective for reducing ageism against older people, but unfortunately, we don't have that much evidence yet showing their effectiveness in reducing ageism against younger people. Important comment that I will add here, and that I will equally add when I talk about intergenerational interventions: we need to measure what we're doing. This was one of the biggest frustrations when writing the Global Report on Ageism. There are thousands of educational activities, millions, I would even say. Same with intergenerational interventions. Most are never measured. So at most, you may have some qualitative interviews that give you some information about how people felt, for example, when being involved in an intergenerational intervention. But that tells us nothing about the actual effectiveness of these types of initiatives in reducing ageism. We need to have more information on this, and we need to have more data collection that also looks at the impact of these types of interventions on reducing ageism against younger people, because otherwise, we're not going to continue progressing in these areas. But if we look at the progress made with regards to educational activities, I mean, as mentioned, there are so many different educational activities that have been popping up in the past few years that have taken different types of formats. These include, as I mentioned, activities where, for example, in one country, they integrated content on ageism and aging into the curriculum and distributed the plan into various sessions. They had like one session, for example, that encouraged students to discuss what it means to be an older person, to help them really consider someone else's perspective, right? Then a different session that aimed to raise self-awareness of ageist attitudes and stereotypes. And then a third and fourth session that promoted mutual respect and then aimed to foster positive and respectful interactions between, in this case, it was adolescents and older individuals by teaching interpersonal skills. It's another positive advancement that I'm seeing is that some formal educational settings are also starting to integrate ageism into their curricula. And this is very important, because up until recently, most of these efforts are kind of like done on an ad hoc basis or kind of like on and off, depending on the passion and the inclination of an individual teacher to cover this content, but they're not necessarily integrated and formalized. And it's important to have that so that they're sustainable over time. I am Spanish, and it's been quite interesting for me also in Spain to start seeing even, so there is this end of high school exam, statewide exam that students have to do in order to be able to access university. And in the past few years in different regions of Spain, they have incorporated the exam that focuses on Spanish language, has actually focused on ageism. So they've asked students questions related to ageism, which is a positive, to me, signals positive progress. Like even educational, I mean, there's a statewide exam. All of the students who had to take that exam, after taking that exam, will definitely know what ageism is, right? So these are different ways in which we can start incorporating and formalizing these types of interventions in our countries. And last but not least, I wanted to talk about intergenerational interventions, which, as has been commented earlier today, what they're great at doing is at promoting interaction of people of different ages. These are the most diverse because obviously they tend to bring together people around a common interest, and we all have different interests and hobbies, so they can be as diverse and focus on as many themes as hobbies we all have. The good thing about these interventions is that they're effective for reducing ageism against older people, and they also show promise for reducing ageism against younger people. One important aspect that I think it's worth highlighting is that the interventions that combine education and intergenerational contact have a slightly larger effect on reducing prejudice and stereotypes than intergenerational interventions alone. Luckily, most of the intergenerational interventions that are designed with the idea of reducing ageism, they generally have an educational component. Not all of them, but oftentimes that's the case. But just something worth having in mind if you're planning also to design future types of interventions. In this area as well, we see a lot of progress. I mean, this was also the case even before the report. As I mentioned, intergenerational interventions have been with us for quite some time. So for example, I include here some local initiatives that include like social gardens that have taken place in different parts of Spain, for example, in this case, that just bring people of different ages together, not necessarily only, and I liked how Maria highlighted this, because it's true that I keep hearing time and time again that when people talk about intergenerational activities, they tend to immediately think only about younger people and older people, forgetting the middle bulk of the population, which also has to be involved in these types of activities because they can be as ageist as anyone else, and oftentimes even more ageist. So it's important to involve them as well. I also recently learned about a great initiative that took place in the region where I'm living right now in Spain, that had high school students connect with older people in their community through letters. So where they had to introduce themselves, the older person had to do the same, and only towards the end of the program, for example, they got to meet each other in person. But it was a very effective intervention here, just very close to where I live as well, that I was happy to learn about. There are also other interventions that are more intense in terms of the level of interaction and the length of interaction. There are quite a few, intergenerational housing options that are popping up in many countries, including in Portugal. In fact, a leading in type of strategy in this regard popped up in Porto, and then it was exported to other European cities. And this is leveraging the demographic profile of Porto and the fact that it's a university city. What happened here is that they opened up an opportunity for younger people who were initiating education, higher education, to live with older people who had a spare room at home and didn't want to live alone. So this both reduced the cost of housing for these younger people going to the city, but also then helped address ageism, because intergenerational interventions help to address ageism, and then had other benefits as well. We have similar programs in many different countries. Unfortunately, many young people still don't know that these are available. So we need to do a better job of, I think, raising awareness about these options. And just the other thing that I wanted to highlight here is intergenerational housing options that are popping up. So just some communities that in the design of the entire community or housing option or building are already being thought of as an intergenerational community. This is a recent development. It has not been happening for that long, especially in Europe, but it is also a positive advancement. As I mentioned, with educational activities, we really need to formalize intergenerational interventions, because at the moment, as mentioned, they're not formalized and they're often not measured. And I didn't want to close the presentation before saying that as individuals, we also have a role to play. We also have a role to play and can really make change. And in fact, I don't think we will be able to create a world for all ages unless we're all involved in the creation of that world. And it is with that motivation that I wrote the book that Joanna was mentioning earlier. At the moment, it's only in Spanish. It's called La Trampa de la Edad, which would translate like age trap. The age trap, I really hope that we can manage to translate it into other languages for those of you who don't speak Spanish yet. But yeah, I just wanted to bring that up here, because what it intends to do is to provide anyone, so every single individual, with the tools needed to identify and challenge ageism in their day-to-day life. I was starting to be frustrated by the fact that I only got to reach, those people who joined a forum like the one today, or those people who came to a big conference hall where I was delivering a presentation, and I wanted to reach many more people and give them the tools to address ageism. So with that, I close. I look forward to receiving many questions from you at the end of the session, and thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you, Vanya, for this presentation, and also now mixing a bit about what you're saying about the book, and also in terms of the acting part that also we were expressing before, that Maria showcased my own example that I having my kids having ageist attitudes in their case regard older adults, but then I'm noticing, I am aware, but I haven't been able to transform. I'm trying, but still that acting part, it's still lagging behind. So thank you for your book. That I really hope that it may change how we see it.